Hey everybody, your boy Spuddy here. This isn't really an update. This isn't even really an upcoming update. This is Draba. He's the man behind the missile update that we all know and love. Honestly, kind of the black sheep of the From the Depths devs. For some reason, people always like blame Draba, blame Draba. I don't know. I'm just talking about the memes of it. I love you, Draba. You make my life easier. I'm gonna say it right now. You make the changes that need to be made. And I'm gonna say it right now. These APS changes might look a little might look a little daunting, especially the people that actually play FTD right now. But I like these. I like most of these. I'm gonna preface the video with something though. Just a little something I wrote down. Something to think about during this entire video. And it's why make every weapon similar or on par with every other weapon per cost when you could just give us a strategic resource so that it would make sense for one weapon system to have a clear advantage over another weapon system because one would cost more of a strategic resource than the other. Now that I've said that, let me get right back into this video and let me show you what glorious Saint Draba has in store for us. So he outlines. Sorry, I'm getting those Greek food burps still from the last video. My abdomen and my whole torso is actually like bolt upright just from how much food is in my stomach right now. I feel like Tarare. That's probably not how you pronounce that, but I'm not a French dude or nothing. Tarare. I'm gonna piss someone off with this Tarare. Terrare. Anyway, issues with current advanced projectile system and shields. Advanced projectile system and advanced cannons are synonyms if you don't know. APS, advanced projectile system. So APS raw damage is very high. Newbies building their first boat get shredded. I kind of disagree with that, actually. I think it's more of a problem of not preparing newbies enough for the adventures that await them. Not giving them the perspective of the game that they need armor. They can't just build whatever they want. They need to build a certain way. Excuse me, really? I'm having a burp. I'm fighting with my burp here. Excuse me, unprofessional behavior. Fighting is not allowed on camera. Anyway, I'm going to stop wasting your time here. Strong APS defense is a combination of evasion, shields, and lambs are mandatory. I wouldn't say mandatory, but yes, very necessary in the game's meta these days. So what he's saying here is From the Depths, in From the Depths, to fight APS is essentially impossible. Which I disagree with. I think it's more about it being way too close range, and you're basing APS off of like actual real life modern guns to an extent. And with From the Depths being everything so close range and slower than it is in real life, it's harder to not use shields and lambs if you're going by the whole doctrine of I'm going to have to take a hit at some point. APS coolers are a big overhead for tiny cannons, relatively small for larger ones. I disagree with that actually because From the Depths has this cool thing that you can't do in real life where you could just have 6 barrels, without any mechanical faults there at all. You just have 6 barrels. And what that means is when I make my 30mm guns, I don't put like 3 coolers on there. I put 1 gauge increaser. I just put 1 gauge increaser because 1 gauge increaser lets me have really it lets me have 6 times 36mm, like 6 barrels of a 36mm gun, but I usually lower it to 30mm. Now I do this because instead of having like a small multiplicative bonus on your cooling, I've just cut my cooling down and divided it by 6 because every barrel cools independently. So if you just build more barrels on your cannon, that's not necessarily an issue. But I see where you're going with that coolers being a big overhead. I know when I build like actual ship turrets, most of the turrets cooler. And I mean, the rest of it's autoloader, but what else other parts are there in the APS system? Advanced Projectile System. Anyway, APS recoil absorbers are pointless for things with active stabilization. Recoil could even help with evasion. So the first part of this, what he's saying is that meta battleships, let's say, Recoil would be a problem for a normal ship because the more you fire, the more it's going to tip your boat, the more it's going to kind of fling you back. But in From the Depths, boats normally have propellers on the bottom to keep them from rolling, and so recoil doesn't do anything besides push you away from the enemy fire and make you less susceptible to getting hit by those rounds, is what he's saying here. And I agree, it's like, it's a big problem. And his solution for this later on is amazing and should have been in the game since the very start of it. Okay, so the next point, let's finish with this first. Shields make kinetic shells and railguns mostly useless. If you didn't know, the faster a shell is going, the higher chance it has to bounce off of a shield, even if it's perpendicular with the shield. If it's going really fast, it's going to just right off of it. Hesh squash heads are only useful against weak targets. I mean, that's debatable, but I get it's kind of made for that, isn't it? I'm pretty sure it's made for that. Anyway, shields still get a pretty big benefit from stacking. I mean, pretty tedious to place. I think everybody's just been saying either remove shields from the game or add a central shield option, like a big fuel refinery in the center of your ship that you have to build like a big vulnerable piece of machinery in the center of your ship that takes a lot of energy but produces a bubble shield around your entire craft, or just gives you more armor on every single block, something like that. You know, a universal system that's not extremely complicated and you have to place every single block of it. The simpler the game is, the better. Anyway, not getting into my own criticisms and suggestions for the game, we're going to get into Draba's. I still haven't gotten over with the current issues with current APS and shields. Everything will move a little faster once we get past this because the solutions all fit into these already set parameters. I just have to explain these. But getting LAMs, which is laser anti-munition systems, is always good. It really is. It's not very fuel costly. It's not very space costly. Ever since 5 resources got removed, lasers have been relatively cheap, actually, because you don't need crystal for them anymore. There's no special resource for them. You just use fuel. That's it. They're just... The laser components aren't even that expensive on their own. Missiles are more expensive, which doesn't make any damn sense to me. It should be that lasers are just really expensive because they're lasers. They're supposed to be super high tech and vulnerable and like a strategic weapon. Like, anyway, LAMs prevents a lot of damage for its cost in a wide range of resources. So if you have any shells coming at you, any missiles coming at you, anything coming at you, basically, if you're playing the game, LAMs stops that from happening. Rails at a flat velocity that's extremely good for shells with a lot of propellant, but bad for everything else. I don't exactly know what he's saying. All of my railgun shells use like no propellant whatsoever. Because if you use, let's say you have a 15-meter barrel, and you're using 10 gunpowder, arbitrary number, just say 10 gunpowder, you're going to have a lot of recoil. It's just arbitrary amount. A lot of inaccuracy because this much gunpowder has to ignite through the entire, or has to combust through the entire barrel, and the barrel's too short to actually combust all of that. So it's not actually producing very much of an effective burn on the round. You're not getting the bonus from all of that propellant. But a tiny amount of propellant means all of that can burn, and the way From the Depths works is after that burn, or after the amount of propellant you need to be burned, the shell doesn't ever increase in speed past like increasing the barrel length, but you do get such ginormous accuracy bonus from increasing the barrel length. That's why most of my railgun rounds have 1 or 2 gunpowder in them, and then like 1 or 2 railgun casings, and the rest is just payload. Or one of my rounds is literally 1 gunpowder, 2 HE, and a squash head. Like, it's just all payload, right? Because the less gunpowder you have in a long barrel, the more accurate it is, and then you can just use the rail charge on the round to just boost the speed like crazy. I think that's what he's actually saying, is no matter what you're using as a round, the flat velocity increase from rails is stupid. And railgun casings actually don't matter that much. It's just rails themselves are stupidly OP. I get that now. I had to explain it to the camera to get it myself. I understand what you're saying now, Draba. Okay, so now that we have understood this, breaking it down again for you guys, APS is too OP. Coolers take up too much of your build. Recoil absorbers are effectively pointless in the current meta. People just get around it. Shields make railguns useless. Shields are too exploitable. Lambs is too meta and too exploitable. And rails are too exploitable. Goals of these changes, of the changes we're going to be reading, make all advanced cannon shell types useful. So he mentioned how Hesh is only useful on unarmored targets. I'm afraid about this actually because I don't want every shell becoming the same thing. I want them to be specialized. I want them to be niche. Not every shell should be good against armor. In fact, Hesh should be very niche. Every shell should be niche. It should be strategic. It should be a rock, paper, scissors. It shouldn't be, I put more DACA in my DACA, and so I get bigger boom. So I don't know. That's a little vague, but I trust Draba to handle it correctly. Although I think the one thing getting in Draba's way, really, because he has some great ideas, I think the one thing really getting in his way is the lack of a strategic resource. And I'm going to say this in every video until it happens. Ammo regen needs to be removed, and that will make the game so much better. And then Draba's changes will all make sense to everybody who says they don't. Remove ammo regen, and everything Draba says makes like crystal clear, perfect sense. I shit you not. Just reduce the cost of missiles because the cost of missiles should be the cost of ammo overhead. The actual rails shouldn't cost anything. The cost of lasers shouldn't be the amount of fuel they consume. It should be the initial cost of building them. You have missiles and lasers like twerked around. It's real weird. And all of these changes you're doing are kind of weird when, again, you have this weird imbalance from ammo being infinite. Anyway, going back into this, another goal of the change is to reduce extreme damage output. Now, I can see this being a thing, but I think that's one of those things that makes FTD charming, is things being ridiculous. And I don't think you should make everything scrunched down to the same gray. Things should be black and white. They shouldn't be the same kind of gray. So maybe just explain that point a little better, Draba. Defenses should be good, but not obviously better than armor or whatever else for their cost. Okay, this is another thing that worries me. The end there, for their cost. Everything's being balanced around material cost now because there's no strategic resources. I don't have to repeat what I just said earlier, like a minute ago. But again, things shouldn't be balanced around cost. You know, it's the only thing you can balance around right now because there are no strategic resources. There's nothing else besides materials and time. It's just the amount of time you put into the game is the amount of stuff you get back from it. That's all it is right now. But I think there is one thing in the From the Depths meta people overlook, and it's that everyone has such an over-exaggerated emphasis on armor and armor layering and putting wood behind heavy armor, behind a spaced block, behind a metal, behind an alloy, behind another wood, behind a rubber, behind a glass, behind another heavy metal. I use alloy. I use 1 meter of alloy for most of my ships because speed. I just outrun all of your shells. Don't mind me. I'm just going to outrun all your shells. Don't mind me. I'm going to sit 5 kilometers outside of how far you can even fire, and I'm just going to lob a couple fighters in your direction or a couple missiles in your direction, or both. So I don't know. Maybe I don't know if this is taking into account more than just the From the Depths meta, because at this point the only thing existing in From the Depths gameplay wise is the battleship DACA meta of the bigger the better. Again, because of infinite ammo. Make shield placement easier. Bubble shield, just do the shield generator bubble shield idea. I think Nick's actually working on that. I'm pretty sure I saw that in the AMA, Nick wants to do like a central shield generator system. And to simplify this, the shield generator system, the proposed ammo production system I want to put in, everything, even material gathering, I think you should rework the way we gather materials. Make it all like the fuel system, like the fuel refining system, where you can have either something that produces a lot of fuel and very inefficiently, or produces like a smaller amount of fuel but way more efficiently. So let's say you can mine a lot of materials very quickly, but it uses a lot of fuel on its own. or it uses a lot of engine power. You know, it's kind of just this cycle of efficiency of everything meaning something. If you build a really big system, it might be really, really efficient and you produce a lot of your material, but it's a really big, expensive system. And if you get into a battle and it gets damaged, it's going to be expensive to replace the actual refining system that you have. So it's all a big balance. I think the fuel refining system is perfect, and you should apply that to every other strategic resource you have in the game, because that's the only way you're ever going to make them strategic resources. It worked. You did it once. Just do it again. And the final goal for these changes, before I just start brushing through it, is that tiny aesthetic turrets would be easier to make. You know what? I really don't think they're all that hard to build right now. You just got to know your way around cycling your autoloaders properly and not putting too much cooling on your turrets. Like, again, the trick I mentioned where you just increase the amount of barrels and put a gauge increaser saves me so much time. It saved me so much space. Instead of putting 3 coolers, I put 1 gauge increaser. It's pretty easy. All right, guys. Now here's might be the controversial bit. The way he's doing all of this. I like all of this, or most of it at least. I'll talk about what problems I have with it, or what things I like about it. But shell cooling and loading times tripled. I think that's fantastic, because it means we're going to avoid the big battleship meta of people having like tons of 8-meter autoloaders with telephone pole rounds. You know, they have like 40 HE components and then 40 solid components, 40 flat components, and a fuse at the end. Because again, bigger the better, because like your fuse component takes a less percentage of the total space of the shell, the more components you have, I guess. But anyway, to avoid super long shells, which are very bad, by the way, don't use super long shells. Diminishing returns is a bitch. But a lot of the meta is around these super long shells where people try to maximize how much damage they're getting in. And it leads to super huge turrets, which leads to super huge ships. And the whole thing centered around these guns that just... Sometimes they'll burst fire 30 rounds in a second and then won't fire for like 2 minutes. You know what I mean? Because the loading time's crazy. This is to even more discourage that, because I think everyone's gotten sick of that already. Oh, battleship. Oh, look at my battleship. It has a bigger gun. Look at my battleship. It has a bigger gun. You can build as big of a gun you want from the depths, and you can mod the game to have even bigger caliber guns. But you know what? It's not impressive, because the bigger something you have, the more space you have to make it. If you make something small and functional, I will be much more impressed than if you make something that can do everything, but it's huge. It's like a Swiss Army knife the size of a backpack. Is it useful anymore? No. It's the size of a backpack. Sure, it has a blender in it. Sure, I can do my laundry in it, but it's the size of a backpack. Get out of here with that. Anyway, recoil absorbers, shell health, rail charge, and CIWS damage bonus to missiles adjusted for new reload times. Now, I see... basically what he's saying is damage bonus... Alright, all of these stats, not just the damage bonus, all of these stats are going to be adjusted around the fact that he's basically saying every gun is going to fire 3 times slower. Which I don't like, because it makes all of my guns ineffective. If you don't know, if you have a single belt-fed autoloader with a 4-component shell, 30 millimeter gun, 1 belt-fed autoloader, 4-component shell, it'll fire at 652 rounds per minute. If you cut that into a third, you're giving me like wow, can I not do math right now? Apparently, I can't do math right now. It's like 213 or something like some number around that. You're giving me like 215 RPM, which used to be 650 RPM. So instead of like, it's like, come on, you're hurting all the small guns here, unless you do something tweaking-wise to make it not a linear equation, but like something where small guns can still... and then big guns really have to take it slow. You should do something like that where it's more like logarithmic, where it's like small guns really pick up on the RPM. Or no, that'd be... no, Yeah, that would be logarithmic. Small guns pick up on that RPM real fast, and then like the big guns just they take so much time to cool. That balance this out. That would help. Anyway, unmitigated recoil applies an accuracy debuff that decreases over time. This would be great. What this means is that instead of like when your gun recoils, instead of it literally just pushing your shit back and applying that force, the actual gun will become inaccurate, which just is one of those things where you're like, was that really not in the game before? You'd think it was. It's just one of those things you don't think about, I guess, but that is like an amazing feature. Thank you for thinking about that, Draba. Having an accuracy based on the recoil. So if you're stabilizing your ship or you're on a fort that you don't technically need recoil absorption, but your guns have no recoil absorption whatsoever, and you're like stabilizing yourself, your guns are going to be inaccurate. This is also a great change because it makes it so that you can't just have coastal guns without recoil absorbers. Every gun's going to kind of need recoil absorbers. Coastal guns, guns on fortresses, guns on huge battleships are going to need to be able to manage their recoil. Otherwise, it'll be too inaccurate to do anything. Although flat guns would be kind of cool because you don't really need to be super accurate with them. You know, you just kind of pew-pew with them. And then at that point, you can remove the overclock settings for APS. If you don't know, there's an overclock setting for advanced cannons in which you can make it shoot slightly faster than its cooldown time at a penalty to an accuracy. At this point, you should just say, screw that, because this system replaces that. If you fire before your recoil is adjusted for, you're going to have an accuracy anyway. So just keep that system, remove overclocking completely. It just doesn't need to be there anymore. Where are we now? Shells now generate heat. And next shell can only be fired when that heat is gone. All cannons dissipate heat per second. Each cooler adds a small amount to that. That's really cool that they're putting in a heat system instead of just having a timer and a multiplier. Because there's a heat system, I'm super excited. One, this can lead to fire in From the Depths, which is something I think we've all wanted forever. A heat system, even if it's not visual fire that spreads, a heat system would be great. Something to make your fuel combust if it gets hit by HE or something like that. A heat system. So what I can see from a heat system is not only will it benefit the coolers being easier to manage, but you can put buffs on it, like being underwater can give you a bonus to cooling. Going faster through the air could give you a bonus to cooling due to air cooling. It can make it so that you could technically have air-cooled machine guns on your little biplanes, or like water-cooled underwater cannons. You know what I mean? Like, you can have all sorts of cool stuff like that, and because the heat's actually there, it can be detected by the infrared detection in the game. So much cool stuff is coming out of this. Okay, so rails have been changed to give kinetic energy, so the same rail charge gets a shell from 0 to 500 meters per second, or from 500 to 700 meters per second. Okay, that's great. Instead of just rails physically add kinetic energy to the shell. They just physically add energy. That's exactly how it should be. When I say Saint Draba, I don't exaggerate. I love this man. Oh my god, he's a posting freak. My god, he's the dev we need but do not deserve. Okay. Railgun chargers can connect to each other. This is a surprisingly big quality of life change, because if you're an APS Tetriser, you know that like on the corners of the gauge increasers, you can't like put anything. Now you can, because you can connect your railgun chargers to each other. So you can effectively use more of your space. You can use your turret space more efficiently and more effectively now. Minor warhead damage adjustments. Oh my god, I'm sorry. The frog in my throat is like trying to choke me out right now. Minor warhead and damage adjustments. So it's probably just going to be adjusting things to go along with the new APS adjustments. Also probably some game balance things that need to happen. Damage done scaled back to more reasonable levels. Frag isn't the only choice for smaller shells. That's funny. Did you know the most okay, so the standard 30mm shell I use is the standard 30mm shell I use does like 60 kinetic damage. Even if I use a Sabo head, which severely limits any explosive or frag warheads by 3/4, even if I put a Sabo head and a frag, the single handicapped frag warhead has one frag warhead and does 90 damage, which is more than the most I can get out of it through kinetic damage. So frag is literally overpowered at this point in the game. So thank you for making it so frag isn't overpowered. Thank you, Draba. Thank you, Base Draba. Base Draba. Tiny cannons do not need coolers. Small ones, only a few. Extreme recoil matters. Okay, tiny cannons do not need coolers. I'm interested in that, because if you're saying like you're gonna give the firing piece a base, like a better base cooling, because the firing piece itself should be able to cool the shells a little bit. Well, I mean, I guess that would be a given in the shell stats. And anyway, maybe just give them. No, fuck. Just don't listen to me. Like, just trust the Draba. Trust the Draba. I want my Burts to still Burt. If you take my Burts away, you take away my soul. Anyway, Lambs is still good, but the damage prevented cost goes away way down, so skipping it, getting something else instead are options. See, you know, I kind of actually don't like that. Although I hate Lambs, I really don't think it's a good thing to have in the game. I don't like that it's balanced around cost, around how much you put in, how much you get out. Because, like I'm saying, when the game was first around, you had strategic resources, you had crystal, and like Lambs was reasonably good. It was good, and it was reasonably good because you had the ability to build all of those laser components because you had all of that crystal. And at that point, you've reached the end game of the game where every craft is like that. And it's fun. It's fun because you have to beat the enemy's APS with your APS. And I mean, honestly, APS ruins the fucking game. Just let's be honest here. APS is like, it just slows down gameplay. So do shields. Shields and APS really just should be its own thing. Maybe again from the Nibs DLC or something like that. Anyway, going back down to the very bottom, the shields changes, the proposed shield changes. I'm actually a little more excited about it because the very first change to shields is the most exciting thing I've heard in a long time. So when a long time ago, once upon a time, from the depths, far, far away, shields used to be penetrated easily by high armor-piercing rounds. So if you had sabos, they would go through your shields. They nerfed sabos because they used to be the meta thing that would Swiss cheese everything. They nerfed sabos by making it so that the higher velocity your round is, the more of a bounce chance it has. That made it so that the faster rounds, like the sabos on the railguns, just ping straight off of any shields. First change he wants to implement is removing that feature so that sabos have at least a chance of penetrating through the shields. And I believe it's right here. He says instead of it being at velocity of the shell, it should be appropriately at the angle of the shield, just like if you had a normal solid material and a shell trying to bounce off of it, it would have a higher bounce chance the more shallow that angle. Low strength shields are pretty good. You know, I'm not a shield guy, so you can't really take my word for shield changes and tweaks. I don't use them. Stacking limitations removed. Shields roll shield penetration when fired and use that for all checks. I don't know exactly what that means. I think he's saying you can stack shields now, but the penetration chance... Okay, so he's saying the roll for penetration chance on the angle will apply for every shield. So if, like, let's say you have a 50% chance of bouncing off of the first shield, and you go through, you'll have another 50% chance of bouncing off that shield. Like, it'll just stay the same chance, you know, throughout the whole thing. So if they have one shield at 50%, it'll be 50%. If they have two shields at 50% chance, it'll be 25% chance to get through. If they have three shields at 50% chance, it'll be 12.5% chance to get through. I think that's what he means. Draba, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm trusting you. Disruptors apply a debuff to shield reflection chance. That's cool, so shield disruptors don't deflect as easily. Disrupt mode removed. Old disrupt shields convert to reflect shields. Disrupt shields, so here's your shield, right? Here's your round. Reflect shields would reflect the round off, but refract shields would, or disrupt shields would refract. So let me do this in a way you can understand. Going up like this angle, it would be going out the other side, but like down at this angle, it'd be refracting down into. It's weird. Just look up refraction on Wikipedia if you don't get what I'm saying, because I know my explanation's going to be a little wiry, especially now that you're 30 minutes into this video and your attention span's probably like, Spud, get on with it. I'm getting on with it. Max distance down from 25 meters to 15 meters. I like this. It means shields can no longer be way out here. They gotta be like over here. So they kind of have to hug the craft a little bit. When Nick implements a bubble shield, all of this will just not matter anyway. But I love the first change. The first and second points here are the most important. I think they should be this. This needs support. These changes need support. If you agree or disagree with these changes, post it in the comments below. You know, talk about your friends with these. Talk about these changes with your friends, because some people might not have the attention span to watch this video. If you have people that play from the depths and who don't watch my videos, maybe just talk about this with them, you know, and let me know the results. I'm just gonna end the article on this little the bottom here. These changes make shields a somewhat reliable, moderate damage reduction. All-around shields are mostly optional. They can be great for the same extra cost armor. Other things can be better in some cases. They are very good for reinforcing small parts against penetrating damage. It's like Drab is actually trying to make this a strategic game. I love it. I love it. I love it. Gee, it's bringing me back. It's almost giving me like nostalgia for FTD, really. Let me finish this. Fast shells with high kinetic components are better hit rates, do less damage overall, and lose more against shields. Disruptors will do something even if only some stray shots connect. So all of this is just making life easier for all of us playing FTD. Thank you, Draba. This has been Spudcast with a little bit of a proposed advanced canon set of changes. Thank you for listening, and please have a buoyant day. Clicky, clicky.